This week on Quadriga, Turkey in turmoil, a divided society. A wave of protest has swept across Turkey. Police units have been cracking down on demonstrators, hundreds have been injured and more than 1,000 arrested. There have been major outbursts of violence in Istanbul, in Ankara and in dozens of other cities across the country. It all started with a protest about plans to build over a park by Taksim Square in the heart of Istanbul. Soon the protests had taken on a new dimension and were aimed at the Erdogan government as a whole. So why are the demonstrators so angry? Your host this week, Peter Craven.
Hello and a very warm welcome to this latest edition of Quadriga, where we're going to be discussing the latest developments in Turkey. Protests, the most dramatic and the most serious in many, many years in the country. As we've seen, arrests, violence, fatalities even. Where has it all suddenly come from? That's the question we're going to be exploring here today. And to do so, I've got three excellent guests with me here in the studio. Let me begin by introducing them to you. And the first person I'm going to introduce to you is Gökçen Dinç. Thank you very, very much for joining us today, Gökçen. Now, for several years, Gökçen was the editor of the leading Turkish news magazine Yeni Aktüel. That was from 2006 until very, very recently. She is still a freelance journalist, but she is also currently writing a PhD focusing on Islamic and secular policies in the late Ottoman Empire and Turkish Republic. Interesting stuff. Now, my second guest is Kubra Gümüşay. She is a student of political science based in Hamburg and in the United Kingdom, in Oxford to be precise. She's also an influential and well-known blogger. What's more, her blog is focused, although not exclusively, on what life is like here in Germany and elsewhere for Muslim women who choose to wear headscarves. And my third guest, last but not least, as they say, Markus Kaim. He is from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. His area of expertise is defence and security policy, and especially NATO. Now, that is very important for us, of course, because Turkey has long been a key member of the NATO military alliance. Well, welcome to all of you. Gökçen, I'd like to begin with you with a simple and straightforward question. What is going on in Turkey?
To summarize it straightforwardly, Turkey wants to stay democratic. The government was always after the democratic values in Turkey, but now, approximately since 2 years, this attitude changed slowly, and there's increasing control over freedom of speech, for instance, over academy, over press, and over public spaces. I find it really important. Mm-hmm. And so people have waited doing nothing, but at some point it exploded because they felt that nobody was listening to them. Their voices were not heard. The government, especially Mr. Erdogan, was deaf towards them, and the folk, the ordinary people in Turkey, were really angry with him. So this, actually, these demonstrations quite make it clear that there is a strong civil society in Turkey, and they want to make clear that they exist, actually.
Okay, one very interesting point, something that was new to me, or not new, but I really need to know. You said 2 years ago, you said the Erdogan government was associated with democracy, has been associated with democracy. You credited the government with that. And then you said 2 years ago the mood began to change. What happened 2 years ago? Why that?
Well, 2 years ago, actually, since 12 years, the government is in power. But
absolutely. Yeah.
After, it's a long process, but I believe after the demilitarization of the country was complete, it felt that they have the power, actually, and they can do whatever they want in the country since they have the majority. So there is no one there. There was no one who could stop them doing whatever they did. The NGOs were silent, non-governmental organizations. The press was put under control, strict control.
Came under increasing pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The military was not so strong anymore. The opposition party, that's a really big topic, but the opposition party was not making an effective opposition, I would agree. So since 2 years, it feels that it has totally power over the whole country.
Quadriga Musa, I saw you nodding, about a lot of what you've heard and listening carefully to what you've heard. What's your take on it all?
Yeah, I think I would also add that I think another topic was that. So I've been talking to a few friends who've been analysing Erdogan for quite a long time, and they've been saying he's got this granddad mentality where he's like, let me give you an advice on something, and then it's something that's very personal and something a prime minister should not be intervening in, such as abortion or how many children you should have or what kind of bread you should eat, and I think these kind of things he said made people see him as someone who was trying to intrigue into their personal life as well. So it wasn't just what you've mentioned, the policy, the opposition party not, being a real opposition, civil society not being heard, and media not sort of covering what people wanted them to cover, but also I think that they felt there's sort of someone trying to intrigue into their lives, and secondly, what I've also been told and what I sort of agree on is that he's got this street boy mentality, right? He's this he's strong. He's got this granddad / street boy thing where he's like. Sometimes he can be very harsh, right? Or look angry, and from what I've got from people is that they have also reacted to this. They have also reacted to this anger with anger as well. So I think this is also on an emotional level very important, because those are hard facts, you're right, but I think on an emotional level there was also more going on.
Okay, we're going to be talking about the personality, the political personality of Mr. Erdogan later. A lot of people outside Turkey have reduced this to simply secular versus Muslim. Yeah? Yeah. Are they right to do so?
Oh, no, definitely not. I think this is also very wrong, because Turkish society is already a very polarized society. You have different political ideologies, interests, and religious groups, and if it would be portrayed as something like that, it would totally accelerate this polarization and damage society in a really bad way. Also, I think this already has happened. During the protests, because there were people who were trying to provocate others through false news on both sides. And I've just heard that a few days ago, I think in Izmir, a group of Muslim women who were wearing the hijab were attacked, and their headscarves were stripped off. And then these kind of things will continue happening if we keep on trying to create, black and white. And I think there are many people who support the government, but who also say, there are things I'm critical about this, and I want to be seen as someone who is critical but also supportive. And then there are people who are saying, I'm against the government, but I'm also interested in a constructive debate. So there's like black and white, and there's everything in between, the 1,000 shades of grey, probably.
Okay, so we don't want any black and white. That's one thing we've established. Markus Kaim, let me ask you I'm going to ask you my second question as a security expert, which is what you are. But first of all, give me a personal take. I know that a lot of people outside Turkey, but a lot of people in Turkey, in Istanbul specifically, have been comparing. They've used the words Taksim Square and Tahrir Square in one sentence. Yeah, Tahrir Square, where the revolution in Egypt came to a head. Do you think, as somebody who's a person watching the news, does that sound plausible to you?
I think the picture is a little bit more complex here. I think the maybe ironic development is that 2 years ago, Turkey and Prime Minister Erdogan has been one of the leading symbols for the uprising in the Arab world. He was praised in Egypt, he was praised in Tunisia, and now it's almost ironic that he's now considered to be in Turkey a similar situation like in Egypt, a similar situation in Tunisia. Regardless of any criticism and regardless of the personality and the political systems in Turkey, I think it's not really fair. Turkey is a working democracy. I think maybe we have a weak opposition which is not working appropriately or as it should, but we have, exactly as you have elaborated, a variety of political opinions which can be expressed freely. You have checks and balances, and I think we have to take into consideration that the Erdogan government managed something to do which several Turkish governments did not manage to do, limit the influence of the military, which is a tremendous achievement for the Turkish political system. Therefore, regardless of any criticism, I think this comparison is not really appropriate.
Important points, important insights, and I see that you're both nodding there as Markus outlines all that. But fact remains that what we have in Turkey at this point in time is an ongoing situation. It's a situation of turmoil, of upheaval. Turkey is an important ally for Germany and an important ally for NATO. How concerned should we be?
I think we shouldn't be concerned about the specific developments of the last days and week. But so long as the political system remains to be stable, and as far as I can see, it's stable. I think the learning process will take place, or has to take place, that democracy in the eyes of Erdogan has not only to do about having the majority and keeping the majority. The question is how to cope with minorities. But this is not a question for the alliance per se. What is more of concern for the alliance is the situation at the Turkish-Syrian border, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to talk about that
Absolutely.
later.
Okay. Gökçen and Kubra, Germany has a big Turkish community. People outside in the big wide world know that, and I'm sure they're very interested to hear what you can tell us about what is being said about the latest developments in Turkey, here in Germany, in Berlin, and throughout the country. Gökçen, what can you tell us?
I was already active in these organizations around these demonstrations, and I would suggest as you said, the Turkish community in Germany is really diverse. So there are different opinions about what's going on there. But on the other hand, just like in Turkey, these demonstrations kind of united people who would otherwise not come together. I was in these big demonstration on last Saturday in Kreuzberg, and there was a...
Let me just interrupt you and explain. Kreuzberg, a very diverse district of Berlin, very famous for having a very large Turkish community.
Yeah, exactly. But the interesting thing was many people who were living outside Kreuzberg, Turkish... many people coming from Turkey, also came to Kreuzberg with their children, with their mothers, with their old fathers, grandfathers, and it's sort of united people, the left wing, for instance, Turkish people, or the secular ones, or the nationalist ones. So it's... This anger towards Erdogan was there visible also, because I think we'll talk about that later, but nobody actually is directing the attention to the problems of the government and the policies actually, but the main symbol of these demonstrations, of these movements in Turkey is Erdogan itself as a person. So it was really interesting, the march, and I think that's the case for Germany also. It's the whole Germany. I mean, there have been protestations in other cities also, and you could see that the diversity of the crowds. And about the AKP supporters, I would say they are still waiting to see what will go on in the next few days.
Well, Yeah, I think the sort of thing I have a problem with is I don't necessarily think that Erdogan is the cause of the problem. And also, that's why I sometimes find it problematic when he is seen as the sort of equivalent of the problem, and if he goes away, the problem will be solved. Because I think this is a systematic problem that exists in Turkey, because like older people remember how it was before Erdogan was there, before the AKP was in power, and we always had a system. Whoever was in power had also the power to oppress people who have had a different opinion. So I think, so my personal stance on this, for instance, is I don't think that this problem is linked to specifically the AKP or Erdogan. I think there's a systematic problem in Turkey, and that is whoever is in power has too much power. So I think in Turkey, to make it more democratic, there has to be some tools so that the opposition can be more powerful and can sort of interfere more into decisions that are taken. Also, civil society should have more influence on certain topics. So, yes, I agree. Your analysis is right, that most people sort of see him as the symbol, but I find that problematic.
Mm-hmm. I would say, yes, of course, the main problem of Turkey is that whoever has the power has too much power. Yeah. But AKP's success was part of that point, actually, because he promised to change the system. Yeah. That's why he got more than 50% votes. I mean, not everyone who voted for him was a religious person as much as Erdogan, for instance. Yeah. But he promised, he argued that the system was wrong in Turkey, but then after 10 years, he was more and more becoming like the system itself. It's really problematic. He can't see what he has been through, actually, at this point, I think. And for instance, yes, we are coming to Erdogan once more, but we can't handle the situation without referencing him, actually. Yeah. And that's important also. That's an important point. He can't stand any criticism. No. He can't, absolutely. And I know that not only outside AKP, but only within AKP. AKP is also diverse.
This is an important point. Yeah. And a lot of people within his own AKP party have been saying, you know, he's not listening to us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm also in close contact with not only feminists and left-wings in Turkey, but also religious people from other tarikats and etc., other religious groups. And they have been criticizing Erdogan really, I mean, the critics have been increasing in the last 2 years.
Sometimes even more harshly than people you would expect them from,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. And of course, there's this Gülen movement effect also, the dichotomy, like kind of, it was visible, but then it was made invisible, sort of sudden. So.
Okay, let's just go back. One thing, we've talked about the word diversity has been used a couple of times. Let's just talk about, give me a quick assessment of who is involved in these protests, because everybody I talk to here in Germany is saying, who are they? Yeah?
Mainly young people, aging from 19 to 30. Yeah. Other than that, feminists, housewives, old people, families, I mean,
are you saying, because I think this is an important point, are you saying westernized, secular, urban, liberal?
No, I wouldn't make that argument because, for instance, the anti-capitalist Muslims are there also, and they are really, their arguments are really attracting audiences. And last night, it was a holy night in the Muslim world, and they were together in the Taksim Square and celebrated this holy night together. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not only secular, urban, liberal people, but also Muslims. There were many, just one point, there were many women with headscarves also. Yeah.
So what, Kubra, who are you seeing when you watch your TV screen?
Well, I don't watch TV, but we don't even know what that is. No, but what happened last night, for instance, I found that very symbolic and very positive sign as well, because that was basically saying, no matter, I mean, they're not only, Turkish people are not only Muslim. There are people who are traditionally Muslim and religiously Muslim, and then also people who are just of different, who are Christians, Jews, etc. And so I found that a huge symbol to sort of say, no matter what background we have, we will now come together here and celebrate this night, because we know it's important to Muslim protesters or to the Muslim population. And I think it was probably so far the most effective way in saying, oh, we are not simply just the secular Kemalist elite that people were saying or talking about. So in that way, I found that a very positive sign. Yeah.
It's interesting. You could almost say that the protests are like an advertisement for the diversity and complexity of Turkish society. It's like an advertising campaign for the world outside Turkey. Look at us. Yeah.
I think it's like that and not that as well, because at the same time, we have these positive symbols, but then you also have, false information that are spread out. For instance, about that mosque, where apparently protesters have been sort of hiding in, and they've been drinking beer and wearing shoes, and what you shouldn't do in the mosque, and left it dirty. And then you find out later on, actually, they weren't drinking beer there. The imam, there were people who were sort of helping the injured people, and the imam then negotiated with the police so that the protesters could leave the building, and happened so quick that they didn't even have time to clean up. So it was just a very simple and basic explanation to what had happened there. But those pictures had sparked so many protests again. And then you have the other side where protesters are spreading news about people that apparently had died, that, there are 2 people who have died, but then I think if you had been following all those, announcements of people who have died, it would be like 50-something. And also like that orange agent was used. That's a gas that is very dangerous, and also was used, I think, during the Vietnam War by the US. Okay. And so you have at the one side, on the one side, the huge option of sort of trying to show how diverse and sort of how diverse the Turkish society is and how much they still have in common, and also how this diversity is sort of drafting them apart.
Okay. I've got to bring you in, Markus Kaim, and I'm very intrigued. There was one moment in the last week which I thought was quite significant. You've talked very favourably of Mr Erdogan and some of his achievements in the security and defence field, foreign policy field. He reacted in one way that he reacted to the protest was that he sat down, he gave a press conference, and he said, foreign agents, foreign influences are involved here. And I thought, well, that's a sort of a pattern that we've seen in Turkey in the past often. I think it's fair to say. But I also wondered at the same time what somebody like you would say to that, how plausible that is, who these foreign influences could be that he's referring to.
I don't think that this foreign influence exists. With regard to this uprising of the last week. I mean, this is the usual explanation of maybe not an autocratic ruler, but a prime minister which is very self-confident, having a certain perception of democracy, which I already alluded to, as a tool for him to supply political power to him and his entourage. And I cannot see how this uprising has been sparked or influenced by foreign powers.
OK, we'll talk about the autocratic Mr Erdogan. We will come to it in just a second, but there's one more thing I want to talk about. Gökçen, the lady in red. Yeah? We've got some images. I don't know if everybody who's watching the programme has necessarily seen these images. They've been very prominent in the Turkish media. Let's have a look at them now. And can you just tell us what we're actually seeing there and why these are so important?
This was taken, I believe, on the first day of these Gezi protestations. But what's important there is that this woman was just walking there. She is she is in a passive resistance state. So when she's approaching the police just pepper gases her like as if, I'm sorry, but as if she's an insect. I mean, she is really there passive, and you could see the power of the state in the body of this policeman, and the tool for this power with the pepper gas in this picture so well that it became a symbol actually. So I think it has a lot to do with this gendered aspect of these demonstrations, and I mean, there were many women in these demonstrations. Also, for instance, gay people, homosexual people were there also. So this feministic and gendered aspect of these demonstrations was really connected with that picture, what that picture showed actually. You were saying, for instance, Erdogan as the grandfather. I think he is like, I mean, grandfather is not like the father. The father has more authority on his family. So Erdogan is like the father, and here, as a symbol of this patriarchal state father, the police and the pepper gas over women especially, because you know, he's been really obsessed with this 3 children, and the abortion debates, they were really problematic. I mean, the voices of feminist NGOs in Turkey, they weren't totally heard, and nobody cared about the what women actually living in Turkey thought about these issues.
Kubra, what could you add to that?
Oh, when I was following those, because I would also, I'm very much into feminist debates, I sort of agree. I mean, it sparked a debate that wasn't necessary, and I was quite happy that no rule or no certain law was passed after this debate. But again, it showed to me it was like this, let me give you this advice thing he had, and not like, yeah, let me pass a law. So that's why I agree with you, and then but I also think that due to that nothing has happened after that, no law was passed, it was fine. But yeah, basically that, yeah.
But
okay.
Feminist NGOs, just one point, feminist NGOs are arguing and actually have proved that in practice, abortion is not possible in state hospitals in Turkey. That's a really important thing.
Okay, we've mentioned the Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's obviously absolutely central to everything we're talking about. Everybody's nodding once again, Mr. Erdogan, yeah. We'll talk about him in just a second in more detail. Let's just first have this report on what he's up to at this point in time.
As the protests raged across Turkey, Prime Minister Erdogan headed off to North Africa. Opponents say that's just another example of his high-handed style. He's won a string of elections with his moderate Islamism. Supporters point to a track record of economic success. Critics say he's trying to impose Islamic values and is increasingly authoritarian. He's taken a hard line on the demonstrations, denying that they're a valid form of democratic protest. Those who failed to defeat us in democratic elections are trying to defeat us now using these methods. Erdogan's confident the majority of Turks are behind him, and he's got no desire to compromise with those that aren't.
Markus Kaim, it's very interesting that with the country in turmoil as it is, Mr. Erdogan jumps on a plane and goes somewhere else. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about him, your assessment of him from the foreign policy perspective.
Maybe it's not such a foreign policy perspective, but if you compare the pictures we have seen to the pictures of Cairo, of Tunis, I think there's a not similarity in substance, but in similarity in the symbols. I think we shouldn't underestimate the pictures we have just seen, the women in red being pepper sprayed by the police. And with the second factor here, Prime Minister Erdogan having left the country and not being present, it illustrates from my point of view 2 things. First, he has no feeling for how a political system with powerful minorities driven by civil society works. And he has no feeling for how how important these pictures are and how to influence pictures, especially given the experiences of Tahrir Square, of Cairo, of Tunis. I think the driver or the main point for a government is to be, we should avoid any pictures we have seen like this, police attacking women and so on. But I think he's has simply underestimated, and he has no feeling what has really happened there.
How should NATO be responding to what is happening? Because I think it's fair to say that in the last 10 years, the Erdogan period, from the EU perspective, we have been quite critical of things like encroachments on press freedom. From the NATO perspective, I think we've tended to look at Mr. Erdogan and think he's a very solid person to have in office in Ankara, and maybe the time has come to be a little bit more critical.
Absolutely, NATO has become member of NATO in 1952, and it has been important for two reasons. First, the geostrategic position during the Cold War at the southern flank of the Soviet Union, and today at least some observers consider it as some kind of bridge to the Middle East. So by having NATO inside the alliance, you can somehow influence things going on in the Middle East. Second thing we have to keep in mind, Turkey has more than 700,000 soldiers under arms, having the second largest army inside NATO after the United States. So when we're talking about any military operations, be it with regard to Syria or some other place, Turkey is a potent, important player, especially given the financial constraints most other NATO members are facing.
Kubra, I want to bring it back to Mr. Erdogan. You are. I mean, you're a good deal younger than I am, yeah? And you are a member of what I suppose people would call, and have called, the Generation Erdogan, yeah? How does that feel? He's the only leader, the only Turkish leader that you've known in your adult life. That's what I'm getting at, yeah?
Well, but also I know how it was before through the stories and through the experiences of my parents and elderly people around me who were telling what they have suffered from. And I think it was a lot present as well in my case because my mom couldn't study at university because she was wearing the headscarf. And I had many cousins who couldn't do that until recently as well. So it was very present to me, and also looking at, my great-grandfather and what they have been through in Turkey, I sort of see a lot of improvement, and personally I think that Erdogan was so far the best president Turkey has ever had, and the improvements he's made are just unimaginable. Every year I went to Turkey to stay for a few months. I was just in awe how much had changed within that year and how much the country had improved. So I definitely give him credit for that. But I think to keep that going on, to keep that level of development going on, he has to listen to what the people are saying and to what you've mentioned, right? That there are people who feel they aren't heard, and that's going to cause problems in the future, and that's going to be very problematic. I think one sort of thing that symbolizes this is that he said that I think Twitter is a menace or something, and then you feel like, well, this plays a huge role, especially in Turkey. I mean, Turkey, I think half of the population is online. 16% of the population that is online is on Twitter. So I think it's like 7 million something. And if you watch Turkish TV, if you watch Turkish soap operas, you will always see a hashtag, and so people are sort of encouraged to debate on Twitter, online, what's going on in Turkey. So it's very present, and a lot of debates are going on Twitter. It does play a huge role, and for the president sort of not really getting the idea of how important that is a symbol.
I must just correct you. I apologise for doing so, but I think it is important to establish Prime Minister Erdogan at this point in time, because obviously he aspires to become the president, and that's a further complication in this whole plot at this point in time. Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying, that you're talking about Mr. Erdogan. Everybody who's been to Turkey in recent years has seen the country, this immense modernisation. Yeah. And all that is associated with Mr. Erdogan. Is the fact of the matter now that he has overstayed his welcome, or do the demonstrators now want him to reform and continue?
I would not totally agree about the modernism, about Turkey getting more modern, because that's something really problematic. It's he is privatizing public spaces and instrumentalizing them. So it's these. He acts as if these public spaces, not only in Istanbul, in Taksim, but also in Ankara and in other cities, these public spaces belong to AKP and the government, and he has the right to do whatever he wants there. I say he wants because that's the second problem. Although he is the prime minister, right? He is the prime minister, but he acts as if he is the mayor of Istanbul. He can't stay away from Istanbul. I mean, he has this strong urge to have control all over the country. I mean, one of the central arguments of AKP government was that the local administration was to be strengthened. Am I right? I mean, it's really problematic. Turkey is a big country, and the local administration is weak, so that causes problems because you can't manage to have a society directed from just one center. So he's gone the other way. He did not support at all these local administrative powers, but he, on the other hand, decided to have all the powers in him. He even, I mean, with these demonstrations, did we see, for instance, a mayor of Istanbul or Ankara? Ankara mayor was tweeting with hate, and the governors of cities were not there. I mean, a country cannot be governed with only one man. It's impossible. So, and Turkey is big, and in a country as diverse as Turkey, that doesn't work, and we see that. It's obvious.
Okay, so I think the next question is, what happens next? What should happen next? Markus Kaim, let's begin with you.
With regard to foreign and security policy, I think.
Well, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's crucial how things play out in Syria in the next couple of weeks and months, and it's pretty obvious that Turkey has overplayed their cards. That given the fact that 2 years ago Turkey was considered to be not the hegemon but the leading power. The power where everybody else is orienting to. These times are over, the times of neo-Osmanism, so that Turkey would follow the old Ottoman Empire, not in classic imperial ruling, but being a pole where everybody is attracted to. I think this expectation has not been fulfilled. And one of the crucial questions will be what happens to Syria, not so much in political terms, but even in territorial terms. If Syria falls apart as a political entity, my take is that Turkish domestic politics will be faced not only with the humanitarian problems which are associated or which can be seen already today, but also with the question of what are we going to do with the Kurdish question, and what are we going to do with some areas which are at least currently liberated by the Syrian rebels, and that might turn to Turkey and maybe even at the end of the day ask for some kind of association to Turkey. So that will be very interesting to see how this will play out.
Fascinating thoughts. Kubra, what would you like to see happening next?
Yeah, like I won't know, I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a few hopes, and that is, I think the protests have shown, as we've mentioned before a few times, but again, there's a huge part of the population that does not feel that it's heard, that their needs are being heard, that what they want is some sort of interest. And so definitely what the opposition needs to do is see that as some part of sort of power, to see, all right, there is, we could be a more powerful opposition, we could be doing better oppositional work. I think that's important for a democracy, a good opposition, and the government, the current government, to really listen to what's happening, really try to get an idea of what people want and try to be constructive, try to look for dialogue, search for dialogue, talk to the protesters, find out what can be changed, because they are right in their criticism in terms of his authoritarian style of ruling the country and all these things we've mentioned before. So I think that needs to be listened to, but I really don't hope that, so what I would fear is that the country would go into a chaotic state where those protests never end, and the only sort of end of those protests would be Erdogan to step down, because in a democracy you elect, and you don't elect if you don't want that person to be in power.
Okay. Gökçen.
To continue from where you left, democracy is being perceived in Turkey like voting every 4 or 5 years. That's not democracy. Democracy is having the right to say something about issues about the public, actually. So I think this definition of democracy should change in Turkey, first of all. But I believe it totally depends on the attitude of the government and Erdogan specifically. If they handle the situation like they have done until now, I think the demonstrations will go on. Some argue that he is waiting that the demonstrations will decrease and he will have the chance to marginalize them. I don't believe that's the case.
Great stuff. Thank you. Gökçen B, thank you very much for your contribution to today's debate. Excellent stuff. Kubra Gumasai, thank you very much indeed. Markus Kaim, wonderful. I hope we've given you at home plenty of food for thought. I've certainly enjoyed the show. If you've enjoyed it as much as I have, then do join us next week on another edition of Quadriga. Until then, bye-bye.